Well, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, everyone. This is Dr. Bart here at the Health Made Simple show. Today, super excited. I've got a guest on here that I've been waiting to have on our show for quite some time, Mr. Will Harris. And I had the opportunity, I listened to you at first on a podcast with Joe Rogan, and I couldn't help but to think the entire time, this is a perfect parallel. You're talking about farming and regenerative farming, which I want to get into deep here today. All of these parallels to healthcare. This is the perfect parallel. I've spent 26 years of my life, doing the best that I can to try to serve other people and talk to them about how important it is what we put in our bodies. So best you can, my friend, welcome to the Health Made Simple show. Can you tell me a little bit about Will Harris, who you are and how we got here?
I will, and thank you for having me on your show today. I'm Will Harris. My farm in South Georgia is called White Oak Pastures. It's been in my family for 150-something years. I'm the fourth generation of my family to run the farm. My two daughters and their spouses are working here helping run it today. But those two daughters have 5 children who are my grandchildren, who are the 6th generation of my family on the farm.
You still with me, Will?
No.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. So a lot of family involvement. So there, and I understand that there has some changes have taken place over these years, generations. I think you said all the way back into the 1800s that you've owned this family. And now I think you would call your farm a regenerative farm. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, I would. Today we pasture raise 5 red meat species: cows, hogs, sheep, goats, rabbits, and we hand butcher them here on the farm. We pasture raise 5 poultry species: chickens, turkeys, geese, guineas, ducks, and we hand butcher them here on the farm. We have organic vegetables, pastured eggs, honey, and a number of other little ancillary businesses that come from the organism that is White Oak Pastures. That it's probably very similar to the operation that my great granddad and granddad ran, but very different from the one that my father and I ran. My father took over the farm post World War II and really was a leader in the industrialization, commoditization, centralization. And the farm under his watch and mine later became a monoculture, raised only cattle. Intense use of chemical fertilizers, pesticides, tillage, subtherapeutic antibiotics, ionophores, all sorts of drugs, pharmaceuticals. So it's a lot different. The thing I enjoy most about the farm is how in the 150 years, 6th generation, it's come full cycle.
Mm-hmm. I love the idea or the words you use in there saying this is an organism. And I think that's one of the beautiful parallels between the human body and a farm. And I think there's also this parallel of where we started with, of taking care of the body using natural remedies, herbs and food as medicine and rest, those fundamentals, and serving the body to where we are now. And I think we're shifting a little bit, but we came into this full-blown pharmaceutical event. So can you tell me a little bit about that transition of the monoculture, where you're heavy, intensely, kind of beating down the earth to some degree, to where you are now? Because I think that is super important.
Well, in my case, I became increasingly disillusioned with the system, the excesses of the industrial commodity system. So I started moving away from it. And this is over 25 years ago. It was before we started thinking in terms of regenerative or even sustainable. But I mostly started giving up the technologies that reductionist science had given me, things like chemical fertilizer, pesticides, pharmaceuticals, in learning how to farm without them. And when I did, so industrial farming, factory farming breaks the cycles of nature. The cycles of nature are the energy cycle, water cycle, mineral cycle, microbial cycle, carbon cycle, many other cycles that we probably don't even recognize. Using technology, we are able to break those cycles, and we get a short-term benefit from that. In the long term, there are unintended consequences. And I became increasingly aware of those unintended consequences, and I didn't like them. So I started moving away from those technologies and learning how to run the farm without them. And it was a little painful. I was profitable as an industrial farmer.
Yeah.
When I started giving up the tools, my production slipped. Those tools were designed to take cost out of production. They cost money, but then they increase yield enough to pay for itself and hopefully leave a residual for the farmer. So we moved away from it, and it was economically painful, but we made other adjustments and have survived so far.
Was there a tipping point for you that drove that why? Was there something, did you guys recognize, man, I'm just beating up the earth, or this is affecting people's health? Was there what drove Will to say, man, maybe we got to make some change here?
Yeah, for me, initially it was an animal welfare issue. I had a cattle feedlot and was feeding very unnatural food substances to the cattle in confinement. And shipping them great distances, and just doing a lot of other things, pumping them full of pharmaceuticals, a lot of things I just didn't like. And so I started moving away from that, and very quickly became aware that I was doing the same thing to my land that I was to my animals. And it's kind of interesting. We made very intentional changes to the way we treat our animals and we treat our land because we weren't happy with it. We made no effort to improve the local economy. That was not on my radar. Yeah, the town, Bluffton, Georgia, population of 113, had been in economic decline all my life. I was born in 1954, and we didn't know it, but it was in decline when I was born, but you can see it in the rearview mirror. By the time I started changing the farm, it was literally a ghost town. The only thing you could buy in Bluffton was a stamp. There was no business here except the part-time post office. And but when we changed the way we managed the land and the animals and did all the other things that we had to do to make that work, I went from 3 or 4 minimum wage employees to 180 employees that make significantly more than the county average. I'm not proud of what we pay our employees, but it's significantly more than the county average. When that happened, the town came back. Bluffton went from being a ghost town to a really nice little community, and it's a destination, and it's actually an incentive for people to come here and work for us. They want to be part of this community. So the point I'm making is that the 3 things that we think we have benefited is the land, the animals, and the community. Industrial farming made rural America economically irrelevant. It just was not needed anymore. So it wasted away. And that's not just in Georgia, that's anywhere in the country. The more agrarian the economy, the worse it was treated by industrial agriculture.
That's an interesting byproduct, that you literally increase the quality of the town, essentially, is what's taking place. And it doesn't surprise me, right? So again, if we loop this back to healthcare for even you and I and our families, that cycle of life that you're talking about, it sounds like inadvertently, by doing it the commercial way, you're giving drugs to animals and you're doing antibiotics. Well, it's so interesting that we have having this conversation, because it's the exact same thing that happens to humans. We have issues going on, and then for the short-term benefit, right, we interfere, maybe take antibiotics a couple times, no big deal. You feel a little bit better in the short term, but we disrupt the complex situation that's going on in the human body. And I've heard you talk about the difference between complex environments. I'd love to hear, let's go to the deep dive, because I think that's so imperative in this conversation.
Well, you're certainly spot on with your comments about the parallels between my farm and the human body. And and if you think, they're both living systems. This farm is a living system, and your body is a living system. And when we applied, I guess my father's generation, later my generation, applied reductionist science technology to those living systems for short-term benefit, it worked well. It was like magic. But there was unintended consequences that were unnoticed consequences that were undesirable consequences. Your description of the antibiotics is a very good one. The use of chemical fertilizer on plants is a similar one. Just incredible short-term benefit, terrible long-term impact. And who knew? I mean, who knew? You couldn't see it. I mean, it was too long a time period between the application of the technology, the short-term benefit, and then the long-term downside. So you asked about the complex versus complicated. Now, I digressed on you. I'm sorry. Your body and this farm, again, living systems, and they're very complex. There's a lot going on to make this farm work. And there's a lot going on to make your body work. A lot of systems within the system, you're interacting with each other. There's in a factory or this computer we're speaking on, they're very complicated systems. There's a lot going on in there to make it work. The difference, though, is if one component fails in this complicated system, the factory, the computer, the automobile, the airplane, one component fails, it stops working. It just doesn't work anymore. In a complex system like your body or the farm, if one of those many components ceases to work, everything just morphs and it keeps going in a different amount. And reductionist science generates technologies that work incredibly well in complicated systems. We put a man on the moon. It's just incredible. Yeah. But in complex systems, there's unintended consequences that are usually far outweigh the short-term benefits in a negative way.
Yeah, I love the way you say that, is unintended consequences. So as a holistic practitioner, and that word gets kind of used loosely nowadays, yet there's a saying that you almost a philosophy that you need to grasp from the very beginning, and that is that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And it sounds like that's exactly what you're talking about. And, in healthcare, again, it's fascinating. And forgive me for keep bringing it back because the parallel is so perfect. We now have systems that are set up where you have a shoulder specialist, you got an elbow specialist, you got a wrist specialist, you got a gut specialist and a heart specialist. But the truth is, they're all one unit, and it's very complex, and it's very incredibly important that we look at it as a whole, hence the holistic approach here. If I can backtrack just a little bit, you said financially this was a little painful. So is there a difference to operating and trying to produce, say, a grass-fed cow versus a commercial cow? And if so, is there a difference in quality that you know of between those two different animals?
So, yes, there is a difference in producing a grass-fed cow versus a feedlot cow. And most people who decide to operate in this regenerative space come into it believing that if I just learn how to raise that animal on the pasture without the technologies, then I'll be a hopefully successful regenerative farmer.
Mhm.
or rancher.
Mhm.
And sadly, that's not all there is to it. Learning how to raise the animal on pasture is the fun part. And it is challenging, but it is literally the part that we all embrace and want to go to. The reason it is economically dangerous is when a farmer is part of the big industrial food system, part of that long chain, that we're producing whatever we produce, cows or hogs or oranges or avocados or corn, doesn't matter. We're producing it, and big ag takes it off our hands, and then big food turns it into a marketable product for the consumer. Mm-hmm. When you leave that big chain, that big chain of food production, you become your own very tiny little chain, and you have to do all those things for yourself. So learning how to produce in my case, cattle in pasture was challenging, but it was fun and I enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. But I put value in the product, the cow, that I could not extract from the commodity market. If I called big ag, big meat company, they weren't going to pay me any more for it, even though it was hopefully healthier, hopefully better tasting, hopefully less damaging for the environment, many other things, animal welfare, whatnot. I was putting value into the animal that I could not extract from the commodity market from big ag. So I had to find a different way to market my product. And sadly, consumers don't buy cows and hogs and sheep. They buy beef and pork and lamb. So I had to make that conversion to make it marketable. And I figured that out, and it was not fun. It was very capital intensive and very highly regulated and very risky and on, many other things. And when I got that done, I thought that was all I had to do, except there was market access. Even when I made it marketable, beef and pork and lamb, you got to get it to the people that'll pay for it. Yep. And my customers don't live in impoverished rural areas for the most part. My customers are the people that probably your patients. They're focused on their health. They want the world to be a better place. They're aware of the ecological services that my production system offers. Mm-hmm. So by the time you do all these things, then you have really put your risk to reward ratio in a perilous position. Mm-hmm. You've got a lot invested, and there's a lot that can go wrong. And I'm not complaining. I'm just answering your question that there's a lot to it, and financially it's not nearly as rewarding as it should be. We employ a lot of people. We sell a lot of stuff. We do not make much money, and that I fear that's going to prevent the spread of this food production system. That I think we'd all be so much better off if we could embrace it.
Well, I'm here today to make sure that there is no limitation of what you guys are doing there. So I'm going to make sure the word gets spread. I promise you that. So for everyone listening, I
do appreciate that, but I'm not just talking about me and white oak pastures. Yeah. I'm talking about farmers all over the country that are putting themselves financially at peril to do the right things, and it can easily not work for you. And without customer support, it will not work for you.
Yeah. And I completely agree and understand this. So my wife and I, we own an organic cafe. So I'm not on the front end of making that food, but I am purchasing it from the organic farmers. And therefore my prices have to be higher than, the average, say, egg sandwich or juice or whatnot. And I think the beauty is that there's more and more consumers recognizing the power and the importance of good, healthy food. and having trusted resources is becoming as valuable as ever. So for everyone listening today, White Oak Pastures, absolutely do that, and there are other great farmers out there doing it. So I completely
there are others, but it is so hard for the consumer.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the term greenwashing? You know that term?
I have heard it. I'd love for you to elaborate on that, because that's an important one.
So the marketing side of it is actually counterintuitively harder now than it was when I started. When I started 25 years ago, I had to explain to people, even sophisticated, smart people, I had to explain to them why what I was doing was better for the land, for the animal, for the community, hopefully for the environment. And, I'll let you guys talk about the health impact. I'm not qualified to talk about it. I have beliefs, but I don't. You're the expert.
Yeah.
But once I explained it to them, I was able to market my product successfully. Today, because the market has grown, what we call greenwashing has increased exponentially. And greenwashing is when big multinational corporations describe their product in a manner that makes it sound like they're doing what we're doing, but they're not. And it's, the consumer is so busy, they don't have the bandwidth to sift through it. And, of course, those guys produce so much cheaper than us because they're not really doing it. I just saw Tyson has announced climate smart beef, or that's not the name of it, but something. Just these big multinational corporations can hire these brilliant wordsmiths to paint these pictures that the consumer doesn't have time to sift through. So it's probably harder now than it was when I started 25 years ago from the market access perspective.
I think with that, I think the good news is that there's also resources like this, and the fact that we have these resources in these very specific niches that they're seeking it. And there's no doubt a challenge with greenwashing. And for the listeners today, greenwashing shows up as if you go to the store and it says grass-fed. Of course, right? So just about anything can be considered grass-fed, right? And that is, I think, part of the greenwashing. Well, I heard you talk a little bit about your relationship with Whole Foods, and not to pile on that at all, but I'd love for you maybe to elaborate a little bit about that. I think that's incredibly important on how that relationship maybe started and where it is to this point.
That was a very bad thing that happened, and I'm gonna tell you exactly how it worked. But let me first say that Whole Foods, owned by Amazon, it's a stock company. It's a publicly traded company. Yep. And all management in publicly traded companies are obligated to maximize the return to the investor. That's what those guys do. They have a fiduciary responsibility to make as much money as they can and do whatever they can do that's legal to do that. That's the way that works. The Whole Foods story is a very sad one. I sold Whole Foods the first pound of American grass-fed beef that they marketed as American grass-fed beef. I go that far with them, 20 years or so. And it was a fantastic relationship. A.C. Gallo was the CEO during that era. He came to this farm a number of times, and I remember him telling me, "Don't you worry about selling it. You produce it. I sell it." And he meant it, and he did. And we made money during that era, raising beef almost exclusively for Whole Foods. I was also selling Publix some ground beef, but Whole Foods was my biggest customer by far. And one time, I think that we were in probably 70 or 80 of their stores. Every store they had, from Miami, Florida, to Princeton, New Jersey, to Cincinnati, Ohio, had White Oak Pastures grass-fed beef in it. They actually, I spent about $7 million building processing plants and the things on the farm to make my product monetizable. And they actually loaned me about $500,000 when I first got started, when I really needed it. So it was a great relationship. And by the way, I paid them back every penny. But the relationship started cooling, I'm gonna say a decade ago. And then of course, when the Amazon purchase, it really did, and really started cooling. And we reached a point they would not let us make any money. It was not profitable for us anymore. And after the Joe Rogan show, they took everything away from us except one little, I think it's like 12 stores maybe, and it wasn't worth fooling with. We just, I didn't get mad and go away. And you could easily make the case I brought it on myself, but I just told it like it was. I just told exactly what had happened. Mm-hmm. But I think that probably you have a very hard time finding any real authentic food in a whole food store. What's in there today is the same stuff you would find at a Costco or Walmart. Same products, maybe a different label, maybe not. And again, it's not an evil conspiracy. They're making money for their shareholders. Those guys that run Whole Foods, let's just talk about Whole Foods meat department. I don't know, but they got several hundred stores that are 50,000 square foot stores. And a meat procurement guy for Whole Foods, I know their names, but I won't call it. They need to be able to pick up the phone and say, please send a truckload, 48,000 pounds of 6-ounce fillets to the following warehouses. Will Harris will never see 48,000 pounds of 6-ounce fillets at one time. Take meat. So we just don't fit. And the same would be true of, I think it was Atlanta Dairies. They went broke because Whole Foods quit doing business with them. The pathway is littered with producers that were making their living selling to Whole Foods that don't sell to Whole Foods anymore. And again, no conspiracy theory, no plot. We just don't fit.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And I think, both of us doing what we do respectively for as long as we have, you recognize that things change. So where Whole Foods was one day, and I was a huge advocate for years and years, and I'm not even today saying there's bad guys, good guys. I'm just saying it's just different. And as a consumer, we just have to be more mindful. And again, I think it's one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on here today, because there are men and women out there doing what you're doing and having this standard and a set of values that associate with that really drives us. And that's the same thing that, my wife and I do in our business and even our organic cafe. We have to watch the products that we get shipped every week. Sometimes all of a sudden they show up, they look a little different, they're packed a little different. We get on with the phone and we say, yeah, they've changed, maybe a new owner or whatnot. So that makes me ask the question, this regenerative farming, this, improving the quality of the animals. And I really have two questions here. One, let's just go to this one first. Let's just talk about the cow. The cow that is living a life on a farm like yours versus the cow. Let's talk about the quality of treating other animals on the face of the earth decent. Are they living the same life if they lived out their lives? And, maybe a cow, I don't know how long a cow could live, maybe 15, 20 years, something like that. Does your cow live a better, healthier life than a commercial cow? Or can a commercial cow make it 20 years?
So there's no comparison. And you chose cows. We'll have that discussion, but it's even more pointed with chickens or pigs. But so all animals have instinctive behaviors. Mm-hmm. Cattle are meant to roam and graze. Hogs are meant to root and wallow. Chickens are meant to scratch and peck. And when in the confinement model, those animals cannot express those instinctive behaviors. They just can't do it. They're on dirt or concrete or confined with very little square footprint to move. And so it's, I got to believe those animals are under stress 24/7 because they can't express instinctive behavior. If your wife said that she wanted you to stay in a closet that was barely enough for you to lie down in, and just be in there, and you'd be well fed and watered, and the temperature would be comfortable, and the light would be on if you want it on, or off if you want it off. That seems like that ought to be fine, except you wouldn't be very happy. That's called solitary confinement, and we do that to the most incorrigible of people.
Yeah.
So it's just not even close to being comparison. Additionally, you asked about the lifespan. A cow's lifespan is not normal lifespan, natural lifespan. Anticipated lifespan would be 20-something years just left out in the open. And we slaughter most of our animals at between 2 and 3 years old. But and industrially, it would probably be well under 2 years old. But and that's not a lot of difference. But I do believe that the life is much higher quality of life. And from a medical perspective, here's what I think you would be interested in. Let's go back to cattle. A cow in a feedlot at slaughter would probably be 16, 18 months old on the average.
Okay.
Would probably weigh 1,400 pounds.
Okay.
And would have 3/4 of an inch of back fat. And I've never done this, but I would be willing to bet anything that if you chose to not slaughter that animal when it was finished, that's the term we use, it would not live another 12 months in that environment.
Wow. Because
it's dying of all the diseases of obesity and a sedentary lifestyle that kills most of us. So in the case of my animals, I slaughter them between 2 and 3 years old. They'll probably be 1,100 pounds, not 13 or 14.
Okay.
They probably have 2/10 of back fat instead of 3/4 of an inch of back fat.
Interesting.
And if I pardon those animals, they would live a normal life expectancy. They would live to be 20-something years old. So for you as a medical professional,
yeah.
I would think that focus could be on how healthy is it. We say beef is unhealthy, and we heard that for a generation. Yeah. Maybe it's eating an unhealthy animal is unhealthy. Maybe that's the way that works.
Yeah,
I think it probably is.
I think you're spot on there. In fact, I could argue that if I did a nutrient profile on some grass-fed, grass-finished beef, I could argue that beef is probably more nutrient dense and has more advantageous qualities than kale does. So it's very, very interesting how over the years red meat got a bad rap. And I would agree, bad red meat is probably bad for us because it's so inflammatory. And what you just described there, Will, which is fascinating, is that you just described the challenge with our healthcare system. We have millions of people eating cheap, bad food, and we're literally becoming an obese culture. And as a result of it, we need more healthcare. And this is where the system breaks down. Often, we hear of regenerative farming, and I'd love to ask you this question too, is regenerative farming scalable? And I'd love to hear your answer on that. And the challenge we have right now in healthcare, we're trying to make healthcare scalable. And I got to tell people, it's not. It is not scalable because it's too complex of a system. We need a lot of good men and women as doctors, and we need the old school family doctor that knows the individual and the complexity around the human being. When we try to make a system out of healthcare, it explodes, and that's what we're seeing right now. So, I guess back to you on that, Will, is regenerative farming, the conversation that we're having right now, is it scalable, or does it even need to be?
Well, it's just not. it's not scalable for the same reasons you said with healthcare. It's highly replicatable. Mm-hmm. You can do this again and again and again and again and again, but it's not highly scalable. Oak Pastures is probably as big as it needs to be. We never talk about growth. We have no desire to start in another county, or start in another state, certainly not start in another nation. So it's highly replicatable. You can do it over and over and over again. So many similarities between your living system, healthcare, and my living system of farming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100% here. All right, so let's have this next conversation. In a moment here, if I can use my technology properly, I'm going to bring up a video. So let's talk about soil quality and soil content. In my world, as I dive in deep and think about what the human needs, we need nutrients. It's really simple. And where do we get nutrients? We get them from the soil. That's where plants grow. That's where our animals eat. And essentially, we're talking about when a healthy animal is because we have healthy soil. And it could be because of the plants or whatever it may be. But ultimately, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, the quality of our soil is really where this really starts. Is that correct?
Yes. One of the most egregious damages that have come from factory farming, industrial farming, has been what we've done to the soil. Mm-hmm. When my dad first saw, he tells a story of ammoniated fertilizer put out, it was magic. I mean, it was like nobody had ever seen anything like that. Well, it wasn't just him, the whole group of farmers that saw the demonstration, it was just incredible. But what they couldn't see is that ammoniated fertilizer that did such a wonderful, made the plants grow so wonderfully, destroyed oxidized the organic matter in the soil. Mm. It's oxidation, pure chemistry. It destroyed the bacteria, the fungi in the soil, pure biology. Mm-hmm. You can replicate it in a laboratory if you wanted to. So we have degraded the heck out of the soil, and it takes a long time to fix it. You can fix it. Let's be clear. You can fix it, but it is expensive, and it does require animal impact to do it cost effectively. The earth evolved with animal impact as part of the recipe, part of the equation. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying the soil cannot be degraded. Soil cannot be regenerated without animals, but it can't be cost effectively regenerated on scale without animals.
So this whole topic of topsoil, I think it's becoming more and more a talking piece, and we hear some people out there saying that we have 60 seasons left of the topsoil left in our country. And for our listeners, when we talk about this topsoil, we're literally talking about how deep is the topsoil where you still have good soil, nutrients. My first exposure to this was probably about a decade ago. So in my healthcare, in my clinic, I use a lot of whole food supplements. So think of what you're doing, but just in a supplement world where all of the farming comes from, regenerative farming. And I went up to this farm in Palmyra, Wisconsin. And this was a little mind-boggling for me. I had no idea. So this was a supplement company called Standard Process. I go up there and they bring us out onto the farms. And they're not these beautiful farms. They got weeds and they got bees everywhere. And it's not what I envisioned. It was because it was just all this natural influx of plants and animals and bees and birds everywhere. And they would literally have us just dig into the soil with our hands. And it was just rich. It was unbelievable. So up there, they were telling us that they have some areas of the farm, and it's like 1,400 acres or 14,000. It's a crazy amount of acreage of organic soils. And some of it, the topsoil is as much as 8 to 9 feet deep, which is absolutely amazing. Where I think right now, and correct me if I'm wrong, through our country, the typical topsoil in these monoculture farms are maybe 1 to 3 inches max. Is that correct?
Or zero.
Or zero.
Yeah. In many cases, the topsoil is gone, and we're farming the subsoil, what we call the B horizon. It's eroded away.
Yeah.
So the soil that you dug down in that was so beautiful, it looked like chocolate cake, didn't it?
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly what it would. Well, I've never seen anything like it. It changed my whole frame of, and then there was bugs in it. There were things in it, and I was like, wow, look at this. And it was a fascinating moment.
And I'm sure there were as many microbes per cubic centimeter as you would find in your gut, and probably similar microbes that you would find in your gut.
Yeah.
The soil is a living organism. Soil, if your body's a living organism, this farm's a living organism, the soil itself is a living organism. Except we put pesticides on it to kill it.
Kill it. Yeah. And that really shifted. And that took some time. It wasn't, and again, for all the men and women that are doing it a little bit differently, not bad on them. They're doing it in a way that they know. Hopefully somewhere along the way they see other opportunities to do it. That was a big shift for me, to see this soil and recognize, just like you said, the soil is a living organism that we are going to extract our nutrients from. So that's where it really starts. So I'm gonna do my best with technology here, and I want to share a video that you guys made for our listeners today that are maybe listening to this while they're walking around or exercising. If you get a chance, get back to your computers, watch this video. What you're about to see in this video is I'm going to show you this little creek or runoff, maybe a little stream that there's two farms are merging to. And on the left, you're going to see White Oak Pastures, the water runoff, and it looks like every day, pretty healthy water. And then you also see, well, I'll let you, give some explanation to it. You're also going to see another runoff from another farm. And when you see the two runoffs and the waters collide, it's mind-boggling. And what I would say is what you see in my interpretation of this, you're going to see the water runoff on the right-hand side from the commercial farm. That's what's left of, if there was any minerals or vitamins or nutrients left, it just got washed away. All right, so let me do the best I can here. Will, let's watch this little video. Hopefully you can see my screen here.
I can, yes.
Good. And then I'm going to hit that play button. So I'm going to keep the sound off. But here on the left, that's your water.
Correct.
One of your team members. Describe what we're seeing there.
Okay, so now it's not. It's not moving, right? It's just okay. So that is it's actually a ditch. I'm standing on the side of the road. The highway runs through my farm, and the water you see is coming off of a watershed that may be maybe 2,000 acres, certainly more than 1,000 acres. And we'd had about a 6-inch rain. I think we had one followed by 5. And that's a tremendous amount of runoff. And it looks like, you can't really see, but if you put it in a glass and held it up, the light will pass through it. It looks like tea. And it says there may be some mineral soil in it, but very, very little. And of course, what's in there didn't come off the pasture. It came off like roads, dirt roads and such. And then the other, can you make it move?
Yep. Is that moving along there?
No, it's not. Mine's not.
It should be. Just a second there. Oop. Let me see if I can get that back there for us. Whoops. I might have messed up my technology here. All right, we'll come back to that in just a moment there. But hopefully that technology, not my expertise. I'll stick to healthcare.
The living system versus the linear.
Complicated one, correct.
Yeah.
So hopefully the viewers will get a look at that video there and see, maybe you can just elaborate a little bit more. On the left-hand side, we saw what looked like relatively clear water. And on the right-hand side, we saw this influx of this, what looked like a Georgia clay, quite frankly, just washing into it.
It looked like a strawberry milkshake. And it came off of what I think is a couple of 100 acres. So much, not only the quality of the water, which you can easily see, but the quantity of the water. it looks as though there's as much water or more water coming off the couple of 100 acres as coming off of my 1,000 acres. And that's because the organic matter built up in the soil acts as a sponge. My land before I started the regenerative management had gotten down to about 0.5% organic matter. Today it's about 5%. The water that's coming off my neighbor's land, that land's about 0.5% organic matter. So here's what that means. The 1 inch of rain on an acre of land is about 27,000 gallons of water.
Okay.
And 1% organic matter will absorb a 1 inch rain event.
Okay.
So my land at 5% can absorb a 5-inch rain event. Now, not if it comes in 30 minutes, but if it comes over a 24-hour period of time. My neighbor's land, that would be about 0.5% organic matter, will only absorb about 0.5 inch of rain. So the rest of it washes off. And when it washes off, it carries, moving water is so powerful.
Very.
That it carries the topsoil with it. And sadly, in the case of industrial farmers, it's carrying pesticide residue and fertilizer with it. So that water, all that water that in the video you attempted to show, winds up going down the Chattahoochee River to Apalachicola Bay, the Gulf of Mexico. Apalachicola is, when I was growing up, was famous for its oyster industry and the quality of oysters it produced. And there's currently a ban on oystering, and not currently, there has been for a year, a ban on oystering. There's no oyster industry there anymore. None of those good oysters anymore because of all this stuff we put down the Chattahoochee River, Flint River, Apalachicola River.
Yeah, it's that's interesting. And see again that those short-term effects, we're thinking, how do we produce? And this is, a very common model in every business, right? But the long-term effects, and again, perfect parlay to what we look in health, these short-term pleasures, whether it be a medication to get rid of pain or discomfort. Like I said, to make change, it's not easy. There's a little pain and uncomfortableness to get to that other side. And yet I know that when it comes for the human being, whether it be to have some disciplines with the foods we put into our body, or a little exercise or sleep, or be kinder human beings, it takes a little bit of effort. It's simple, the concept. Maybe it's not easy, but it's simple in the concept. But we see if we don't do these things, the downstream effect, literally in that scenario, the downstream effect can be literally detrimental to so many different things. Go back to those cows for a second here. Is there a difference, Will, between grass-fed? So we hear some terminology with grass-fed, grass-finished versus just grass-fed. Because I know the whole greenwashing. Is there a difference there? Do we need to be aware of this for as a public?
Well, the term grass-finished came about because of greenwashing. For me, grass-fed means no grain.
Perfect.
Then, of course, all cows have eaten some grass in their life at some point.
Yeah.
So people started referring to grain-fed beef as grass-fed. And then the term grain-finished came, grass-finished beef. So, it's part of the greenwashing. For every term that we farmers can come up with, the wordsmiths can take it away from us. So there's no, I don't think there's any words you can go. You got to know. The consumer has got to go to the trouble, sadly, to know something about their practitioner, the guy that's raising their food. Yep. And I know people don't have time, they don't have the bandwidth, but it's just necessary. My wife, my mother's generation, and my wife's generation believe that if they sell it at the grocery store, it's fine. I mean, it's fine. If they wouldn't, Costco, Whole Foods, Kroger, they wouldn't have it in there if it weren't fine. And it is fine from the perspective, if you eat it, you're not going to fall over with an acute illness. I mean, that you can probably go in there and buy with reckless abandon and not fall over with direct result of what's happened. But, you know, in that pharmacy, there's some stuff in there that's bad for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, and in the grocery store, there's some stuff in there that's bad for you. But my mother's generation and my wife's generation, I think that's fine. If it's in there, they would not have it in there if it weren't fine.
Right. Well, I think you hit it spot on. The individual, the consumer, ultimately bears the responsibility of knowing what they're putting in their body. And I think, honestly, I think in a weirdest way, like the pandemic and all this stuff that's led up to, there's now more and more people recognizing, you know, I got to be in this for me. I've got to pay attention. I've got to, you know, move in the direction, look for proper things. And I think we're in this perfectly ripe situation. And again, that's why I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate all the men and women out there doing what you're doing, because I do believe there's a big need for it. We were told, we're in my area, we were told you can never do an organic cafe only. So we have a high standard, and I'm guessing you do as well. If it's not organic, we don't bring it in. And I know it's not a perfect label, but we do the absolute best for our consumers. So everybody knows. We've been in this community for a long period of time. They know if Dr. Bart and his wife Kelly are putting it in there, it's clean living. But it's difficult on our end to buy that properly. Now the consumers know and they can trust us, and I think that is the key here. So for all the listeners, find places that you know that the men and women who are the purveyors of those businesses. That's the key here. To know the Will Harrises, to know the people and the men and women who run these farms. And I know you have an incredible team that really makes that motor work. And, you know, a shout out to all of them. And then, and again, in these opportunities now, I think we have more and more opportunities to reach people. And I promise you that we will make sure that everyone knows about White Oak Pastures, because, and again, not just to make it about your farm, but just the awareness that there are farms like you that exist. I think we're just scratching the surface of this massive need. I don't know that we need to feed 350 million people this way. I don't think 350 million people want to do it this way, but there's enough to create more desire, which means we need more, farms like you and more consciousness, because ultimately we're not only giving back to the individual in their own personal health, but we're literally giving back to this earth as well. So I think this is a very, very perfect timing for what you're doing. You know, I was bummed out to hear that, you know, the whole food thing got taken away. But as you know, one thing goes away and the door gets open for another category or another thing to come into your life consciously. So I have a question for you. So my wife and I are beginning small-time farmers. We have this little farm. All we knew that we like to eat clean. That was kind of the driving purpose. And we wanted to see what we could do with our farm. What would you say to someone like myself or someone that's just trying to grow food in their backyard? Can you do this on a micro level? Can you utilize this complex philosophy?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It's incredible to me what you can do with just a tiny, tiny little plot of land. You got to be judicious in what you do with it. Vegetables can be grown on if it's as big as my desk, you can grow vegetables.
Yeah.
Poultry, laying hens require very little room. Broiler chickens for meat, very little room. If you feed them your table scraps, from that's what people have done for forever. A little bigger space is room for sheep. You gotta be prescriptive with what you choose to do with it and make it fit your ecosystem and your economy.
Mm-hmm.
But it can be done with tiny little space, and when you operate on a super small scale, there's not much risk.
Yeah.
And so it all died and you lost some seed. It's not that big an economic loss. So you can learn as you go.
So I want to give you a quick shout out. So I'm in the panhandle of Florida. So from here, you're probably, I would say, about a 3-hour drive. And from where I have my little farm, about a little less than a 2-hour drive. And we have more and more families that are coming up to your place and staying, which is, and this is where I think you're having probably more impact, Will, than you really think you are. And their children are getting to see this cycle of life. Maybe just tell a little bit about what other things you're producing, different foods. What else can people experience if they actually went to your farm?
So I never thought we would be in the hospitality business at all, but we are. And that it came about kind of as self-defense. I'm very, in Bluffton, Georgia, I'm very remote, very one of the poorest counties in the United States of America, Clay County, Georgia, you look it up. I'm sitting here 40-something miles from a Walmart. That's hard to do east of the Mississippi. And I'm bragging because I want to be 40 miles from a Walmart, but that's where 40 miles to a mall, 40 miles to a white tablecloth restaurant, movie theater, ... But because we have been in this space for longer than most, we have a lot of visitors. And when I was just raising cattle and other livestock, people would come to see us and they'd say, we buy your product at that area in Whole Foods and you want to come and see. Would you show us around? Well, I wanted to, and we're gracious Southerners. I wanted to show them around. I was glad they were here, but I had a business to run. So there was nobody to do it. And we'd say, can you do it? I did it last time, you do it. And, it was not a good look. So we kind of organized ourselves. The closest place to eat here was 12 miles away, and it was a McDonald's. So we put in a restaurant, and plus I need to feed my employees. And the closest place to stay is not a nice place. You got to go 45 miles to get to a Holiday Inn or that kind of level of stay. So we put in cabins and we formed. It's just grown and grown. We got a restaurant that serves 3 meals a day, 7 days a week. We got cabins. We got we founded a nonprofit, a 501c3 called Center for Agricultural Resilience, and we'd have schools and lessons, and we have things for kids like horseback riding and some other things. But we don't. Our hospitality business does not make money, but it's our advertising. We don't spend we spend zero for advertising, and I feel like we get our money's worth. We talk about greenwashing. So the only shield and sword farmers like us have against greenwashing is transparency and authenticity. We just got to do what we say we're going to do and be willing to show you. And to do that, thank God for social media, because that allows people to see what we're doing that will never come here. Yep. But even those people have the comfort of knowing that there's probably 10 or 20 people on this farm right now that are here to look at it.
That's great.
And if you follow us on social media, and I don't know how to do that stuff. My daughter does all that stuff, but if she does a good job, if you follow us, you'll know a lot about this farm. And you can build, I hope it builds confidence in people, and that, it could be staged, except you could come see it. And there are people coming to see it. There's not a day goes by we don't have people here checking us out, either to learn or to verify or make them feel good about the system they're supporting. And I think that's important. Again, I don't have the advertising budget a big multinational corporation has to say good things about what I do. You just got to look and see.
Well, I love the fact that you're doing it. That was one of the most impactful things as a practitioner when I took my time and effort. I went up to the farms in Wisconsin. I'm down here in Florida, And I've been to those farms 3 times because I wanted to keep seeing what they're doing, how they're processing. And each time I was equally impressed on the value and the care and the philosophies that they owned in the authenticity. And as a result of it, for now over a decade, I've been using their products and spreading the word with them as well. A little shout out to them, Standard Process. And I think what you're doing is wonderful. So for what it's worth, your daughter's doing an amazing job because your social media is fantastic. We have ordered several times from, we get your foods, and amazing, just so you know. And what I was also very pleased by is how quickly I got it. I didn't expect that. They said I had a little longer time to wait, and it boom, it got right to my house, and it's packaged well. And so all of those, your team is dialing it in. I appreciate that. One word you said there, and it's probably worth us at least having a little conversation about, is resilience. And in that sustainability, it sounds like that becomes kind of the grounding factor, is making sure this whole thing is operating in a resilient factor. Is that correct?
Yeah, I started mentioning this earlier. I'm glad you brought it back up. So there's nothing wrong with efficiency. Mm-hmm. It's incumbent upon all of us in our business lives, our personal lives, to go about things in a manner that's efficient, is efficient. But for the last 80 years in food production, the only metric that has mattered has been efficiency. Mm-hmm. How cheap we could do it.
Yeah, interesting.
And if you only have one metric, then you excel in that one area at the expense of everything else. Mm-hmm. And I think of efficiency as being the yang to resiliency. Mm-hmm. You sacrifice one for the other. Yeah. And there's got to be a balance. Mm-hmm. You can't just measure efficiency and completely, utterly disregard resiliency. But we have. And as a result, we have this very scaled up, linear food production system that's fragile, that we depend upon. And you don't want fragile and depend upon used in the same sense, but that's what we got.
Yeah.
And during the peak of the pandemic panic, I was putting on my boots one morning early, and what CNN was on the TV, and it said the president of Tyson said the food chain is breaking. The American food chain is breaking. I took a picture of it. I've never taken a picture of a TV screen before, but I took a picture of that. And he was right. It was. It was breaking. And then terrible things happened. Animals were euthanized because they couldn't get them slaughtered. And that gets back to your earlier comment about these animals that are eating dying animals. So this is so much wrong with it. So much, so much wrong with the system.
You're absolutely right. There's so many discords that is taking place here. So, all right. So we're going to wrap up here in a minute. So I'd love to hear you answer this question. So I have this little farm, and at this point in my life, when I go out there and I see nature taking its course, I can really appreciate and truly love watching it all come together. You've been doing this your whole life. Do you still have that same joy when you see?
Absolutely. It doesn't wane one bit.
I love it.
In fact, the more you know, the more you appreciate it.
Yeah. And it's so and I love that answer, because that was crystal clear, and I love it because there's something to do when we are in harmony with nature. I think that it's priceless, quite frankly. I think that it's getting lost a little bit. And I think everyone who gets that moment to go back and step in it for a moment, even if it's just to visit a farm like yours. And I encourage everyone to go up to White Oak Pastures, take your family, go be there, experience it, and see that complexity, what looks just normal, of everything working together.
I call it the Walt Disney effect, that people have no concept of nature anymore. Nature, they think about there's a butterfly and a little dog, fawn walks across, and a bunny rabbit, and it's just this Walt Disney image of what nature is like. It's not like that. People see videos of lions killing gazelles and say, oh, nature's cruel. Nature's perfect.
Yeah.
Not kind, not cruel. Perfect.
Amen to that. That is very well said. All right. Well, so if people want to find you, if they want to come visit, is there a website? Do you know any social media handles that you have?
WhiteOakPastures.com is the website. Instagram is White Oak Pastures. I mean, I think White Oak Pastures is who we are. The Facebook.
Yeah.
Got a pretty good website.
Yeah. And so everyone out there right now, just dial it in, click it into whiteoakpastures.com, go there, and you'll see an amazing array of all the different animal sources. And one of the things I love so much about it, a lot of times people just think, well, there's chicken, egg, and fish, that kind of stuff. There's a variety of different stuff. So we have all these different types of foods coming into my house. I'm learning a lot about different animals and foods and products, and everything's been absolutely fantastic. So I encourage everyone, where it's coming from, the source now. And there's other men and women that I want to salute, and I don't know any names, but I know there's a lot of good people in our country right now. They're doing the hard work, and I know you've been coaching and mentoring them throughout our country, and I appreciate that part of the service. I get that. I'm an educator as well. So in my journey and my tour, I speak a lot. I'll be going through the country here. They're going to hear about White Oak Pastures from men and women like you. And I'd like to say this in closing, that this is going to sound weird, but it's real. I literally sleep better knowing that there's men and women out there like you that are taking care of our food supply, that are taking care of the earth, and helping everyone become just better human beings. So I appreciate you.
Well, we all got a role, don't we?
We sure do.
You do, I do, everybody does.
All right. Well, thank you for being here today. And everyone, keep doing your thing. Keep sharing it out. Keep spreading love, especially a podcast like this. Share this with someone you think that would just love to hear it from someone who's in the trenches, that's living and doing what we talk about every single week here in this podcast, about leveling up our health and sources and resources to go do it. So, well, thanks for being here today. And my wife and I are scheduling a visit to come up there. I will let your team know if I can run in and shake your hand. I would love to be able to do that.
Please let me know when you're gonna be here. I'd love to show you what we do.
Yeah,
thank you for having me on today.
Absolutely, my friend. Thanks for being here today. All right.